Hello everyone, Dr. Christine Smith back with a cool guest today who specializes in continuous glucose monitors. And I actually think that this is an important topic to talk about because about 80% of people in the world are metabolically unhealthy. Helping people get continuous glucose monitors in a way that is available and easy and monitors and tracks data for you, or if you're a practitioner working with patients, it also helps you in your business to be able to do that. And so with that, it's invaluable data, and there's so many diseases that are tied to essentially bad metabolic health and bad blood sugar, and it's one of those founding things that you have to take care of in just about any condition is regulating your glucose and regulating your blood sugar. So with all of that, these tools, these biometric tracking devices, they're kind of starting to become the future of healthcare. And I think it's a pretty big deal because a lot of what I end up teaching people is just how to manage their own body and how to understand food and how to understand what foods affect you in what ways. And so when you have these different systems, these different tech tools, then with that you can start to figure out what foods really directly affect your own body. So hello, Boris. I was just telling everyone about you and about Theia, and so good to see you. Thank you for taking the time to do this today. But yeah, I'd love if you could just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in this niche of technology and advancing healthcare in this way.
Awesome to have you. Thank you. Sorry I was a little bit late. I was on the Zoom link, so I think
No problem.
I messed that up. But obviously, it's a pleasure to be here with you and for the invite. So thanks everybody who's also joined. I'm happy to talk a little bit about how I got into health tech, because I actually wasn't like as a business person in it, but definitely experienced my health scares throughout my life. So probably the best place to even start would be when I was 7. I had diagnosis of asthma.
Oops, might have had a little tech glitch there. Hopefully it'll self-correct in a minute. If not, I'll just go ahead and restart this, but okay. Since it's not unfreezing, I may have to go ahead and restart. Or actually, let's see if I can just re-accept. There we go.
Hey, am I back? It kicked me off.
No problem. Okay, so we got to the point of when you were 7, you were dealing with a diagnosis of asthma.
Awesome. Yeah. So, well, not awesome for me because I skyrocketed to the cool kids club. I was on the puffers. So, I would like run and then have to do that. And it was not a good time in my life because I also had to go to these camps to find out what was wrong with me. And they were like dingy lighting, like the food was like in prison camps when like you like go and you get a plate of sludge.
That sounds helpful.
So
promoting.
Yeah. Well, I was like, why would you make like a health retreat like this? I'm like, this is a prison, not a health retreat, right? So I finally got the diagnosis, which I was happy to get out of the dungeons out of. And I was in Germany at the time because we had a war in Yugoslavia and I was a refugee there, so we were on like 6-month visas, so we didn't know if we could stay there, and lo and behold, we couldn't. They're like, you guys have to leave. So we went to Canada, and I like to say like my asthma just kind of disappeared. It was a new environment. Nobody was chain smoking anymore. Like it was going out of style. I don't know. I grew up like I was a young boy in the 90s, and that was like still very much a thing you did, at least in Eastern European households. So, I started to get better. And then at age of 9, I had no more asthma. Like it was just like gone. I had those tests where they show your like lung capacity, and I started beating people. I was like top percentile all of a sudden running every day. And so that was really where like 1 + 1 didn't equal 2. Everybody said this is for life. We're so sorry. It's just something you have to deal with. And then it wasn't the case anymore. So that really, really stuck with me for a long time. And then like fast forward to my early 20s, I got diagnosed with severe Crohn's disease. Now, I always said, you know, I don't think that was fair, because if I had one chronic disease and luckily somehow beat it, you should never be able to get a second one. Like that should just be like a rule of life.
Yeah, yeah, but it's so not how life works. And for a lot of people watching, I'm sure it's like once one thing
Yeah.
happens, the cascade
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, exactly. So it really threw me off, because I'm 6'4", like you've met me in real life, and I lost 50 pounds in probably 2.5 months. And so, and I was like an athlete too. I was playing basketball division like in high school and all this stuff. So it was, when people saw me, it was almost like you can't not react. You know, it's kind of like a shock. You're like, are you basically on your deathbed? And I'm like, I don't know, is the answer. And this was also where I was a lot more conscious about my health. Even since 7, I was curious now. So I had always looked at nutrition, because now I was like, what, you know, why don't I know what's going on? Why don't doctors know what's going on? Like, they're the white coats, they should know, right? And when they gave me the diagnosis, I was scheduled for surgery. They're like, you're only going to get worse, and, you know, there's nothing you can do. So I could take that at face value, and you've met me, I'm like, that's not going to happen. So, because the way I put it is this: I could either just give up, or I could fight for my life and try to get it back. I'm like, either way, like if it doesn't work, at least I tried. And if I don't try, I know I didn't try. So then, you know, there's no win-win there. And I hired 7 different doctors. Like, it was crazy how many doctors I was working with: functional medicine doctor, naturopath, holistic practitioners, energy healers. I had, what's it called, Chinese herbalists. Of course, I had my MDs. I had two gastroenterologist specialists that would give me advice. And I actually think, I always say, this is a lot more confusing than like having one doctor, because they all had different philosophies, right? Do this elimination diet, no, do that one. Do this drug, no, do that one. And so it ended up being, the mental toll was worse than even the physical one, because I didn't know what to do. Everybody was in panic around me, including my family and my friends, right? So I really had to be strong, not only for me, but for everybody else, which I thought was unfair. You know, I'm like, hang on a second, you're supposed to flip the roles here. And so what ended up happening was I would do these tests or like experiments myself, and I would either A, end up in the hospital, which was not great, or B, I would, you know, maybe figure something out or like feel a little bit better. And so then I had to go back to all of my care providers and tell them what's going on and check in on them. And then a lot of those meetings were just me telling them what's going on. And then they're like, okay, we have 5 minutes. So,
Like,
you know, what else
you
can we
checked in on your healthcare providers.
Yeah, right. So I, you know, and I like to say, it probably all did some good. Did it all have to happen at the same time? Who knows? It was just maximum effort is what I was putting out there. And I avoided surgery, luckily. I was able to then go and like travel Southeast Asia eating spicy foods, which again, if I told anybody else, they were like, there's no way if you had that diagnosis that you could ever do that. And I was like, okay, but it happened, you know, so like we can have that discussion or not. And my last colonoscopy showed 0 signs of disease. And that was when my doctor was like, I even bless you getting off meds, because I was on an immunosuppressant for actually quite a bit of time, lower dose, but still on it. And it was a sigh of relief, because even though I felt better, until you get that document that says we didn't find anything wrong, it was a nerve-wracking 24 hours of prep and being like, oh, I hope they don't find any, you know, because even if you feel better, it doesn't matter until you really know. So that was my journey and into health. So I had all this like fragmented experiences. I was very frustrated with the system, and now it became almost an obsession to figure out, hey, what can I do to figure out when I take a supplement or a food or I exercise at a certain time, like, is my body actually like this? And the reason that was important was A, because of my health issues, but also you can argue anything either way, right? So you could tell me a potato is good because it has this many minerals, this many vitamins. It's a carbohydrate, so it's a clean source of energy. right? And then I'm like, okay, well, what if I have insulin resistance? What if I'm allergic to potatoes? What if my gut is a mess, which it was, right? Like you can't just boilerplate advice like that. And I wouldn't have ever rebutted any of those statements unless I had gone through what I went through, right? Because you don't think about these things from a day-to-day standpoint. And as I kept going, this was really the origination of how do we know, is there technology we can use, how do we use it to understand when we do something, what's the effect? And that was really the starting point of Theia.
I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing because you're coming at it from something where you actually have experience on the patient end of things. And I think that drives optimization in a way that will never be understood by someone who hasn't been through it. And
Mm,
so I think that's actually quite invaluable. And I just, exactly like you're saying, like understanding your own body, your unique body, your custom body, which some people are going to be fine with potatoes, other people aren't. Like if you have a lectin sensitivity,
yeah,
which
that's another.
if you have a lectin sensitivity at all, it usually just means that your gut is on the irritable side, and you should probably do some gut healing anyway.
Yeah.
But with those things, it's like that food is going to affect you and your blood sugar and your body's response and your immune system response differently than other things. So I was going through a few of your materials, and I always love what you post, but you were talking at one point about like some of the foods that spike your blood more than others.
Mm,
And I think this is such an interesting thing for people because they don't always think of it that way. But I'd love if you could touch on some of those things that you found, especially now that you're seeing like
yeah.
thousands of people's data.
Yeah. So some interesting things that are, I think people know, like sugar, for example, most of the time is a spike for blood sugars into abnormal levels. But then some of the things were really nuanced. For example, if you ate lots of carbs in a liquid base, so even soups, anything liquid, I guess because of the digestive tract, it just goes through you so quickly. And we would
Mm-hmm.
see massive spikes, even on like healthy soups with noodles, etc. We would see massive spikes. I'm talking like if diabetic level, for people listening, if the diabetic level is 140, let's just say as like a round number, I would see people at 220s, right? So their pancreas is really start trying to catch up. And it could come down pretty quick, meaning the body responded. But that was interesting because I never thought that because of the way that you're administering the food in a broth based or in a liquid base would have that much of an effect versus if you just had like cold noodles and your sides, it just wouldn't have as much of an effect. The other thing is people always disassociate or try to think of food as good or bad. I think that's very common, and there's a lot of diet wars, as you know. And I always like to tell this story. I was living in Mexico, and I went and I ate 4 tacos. And now, if you look at like the taco shell, they're about 20 grams of, basically straight up carbs. So I had about almost 80 to 90 grams of carbs. And my blood sugar, it wasn't even like moving. And I was very curious as to why. So I did the experiment with the same exact meal 2 nights later. And in that case, I had an abnormal spike in my blood sugar. And so then I looked and I was like, well, what was the difference here and why was it different, right? Because it's the same food. And I went at the same time, by the way. So people were like, is it the same? It was. And the first day I looked because I have an Apple Watch on usually. I had 10,000 steps in me that day. And I also hit a workout weight training literally one for 1 hour before that first meal. The second meal, I only had about 6.5, 7,000 steps in me, and I didn't go for a workout prior to the meal. So the way my body utilized energy, even though I had the same meal at the same time, was different based on the activity level of that day, right? So then the analysis can't just be tacos are good or bad because they responded very differently in very different scenarios, so then now I am better at understanding, and other people have been learning, when I eat a certain food is more optimal than other times, and then in what format that I eat it is also going to make an impact here or there. So I think those are two probably good examples to start with. We can dig in
I was gonna
more, but I
say, just because that's such an important concept that like expands into why it can be so important to do a CGM, even if it's just for a little while, just so you get an understanding. Like, I love what you just said. So it's like depending on the movement that you had, you were able to handle a certain type of food better. What are some of the other realizations like that you've had? Because I think that it's kind of like the next step beyond thinking for people,
Yeah.
beyond just like this food raises my blood sugar.
Yeah, I think some of the other things we look at, for example, oatmeal is either a superfood for people or it's demonized, right? It's a very, for whatever reason, it's become a very polarizing topic. And we've seen that about 67 to 70% of the time, people have some issues with it in terms of the blood sugar going too high. But then there's 30% of the population, 30 to 35% of the population, where it's completely okay in terms of a metabolic response. You know, there could be a gluten intolerance, etc. But we've actually seen it okay. And so I've had people so for me, I tested this multiple times. I would have oatmeal just by itself, just to see what happens. Then I added, some egg whites just to see what happens. Then I added in whole egg, then 2 whole eggs. Then I added avocado. Then I added peanut butter. So I was like, stack all the fat and protein to try to make it come down. And so it would, but it would still go extremely high for me. And then a friend of mine ate straight up oatmeal at it was same morning. We hadn't had a workout and it was like completely okay. And then I was like, that's crazy, right? Because you wouldn't expect that drastic of a difference. So that's another one. And then maybe a couple other things are fruit that's high in water weight. So like a watermelon is I think it's like 97% water, eaten by itself, because it's that liquid form, right? Because it's that liquid form, eaten by itself, not before or after a meal, that I've seen almost every single time. It would go and strain the pancreas a little bit. And for some, I don't want to make it seem like watermelon's bad. It's just we see it very much consistently go up, and it's varying degrees, and the body might respond. But I really think it's because the more water-based it is and by itself, and just a straight carbohydrate, it makes it quite the spike.
Well, so this is such an easy concept for people to throw into their life, right? So
Yeah.
you're gonna do that, let's all be real, we're all just humans, we all live sometimes. If you're gonna do that late night binge, you're gonna have some salty chips or something, maybe try to have some avocado with it, so you're not just pounding carbs and you actually get the fat with it, or have some fiber, something to balance out what you're doing, which is the whole concept of balanced eating.
Yeah.
So thank you, that was really helpful. I love that. So I think that leads right into why should people use a continuous glucose monitor? Just what's your take on that?
Yeah. And so again, 2 schools of thought here. One is it's completely useless unless you're a diabetic, or everybody should wear it, And so I obviously made a company that utilizes the technology. The reason it's important is because there's never been a tool, and this is for everybody, there's never been a tool ever that we've had that gives you an instant feedback loop on something that you just did, right? And I'm not against labs at all. I had to take a lot of labs all the time. So point in time tests are great. It's just they really don't give you what's going on right now, what decision you made right now. And that was always my problem. And you can also game labs a little bit, where if I do a 7-day fast, but the month before I ate McDonald's every day, I would skew the effect of the McDonald's. Or also if I ate really, really healthy for 3 months and then I crushed 6 beers the night before, I'm sure my lab work would be skewed, right? So it's that point in time actually matters. Maybe you had a bad night of sleep, right? If you have a bad night of sleep, we consistently see elevated blood sugar levels. So my fasting blood sugar might show up higher than it normally is because I had a bad night of sleep on that point in time test. So this is where I go back to what keeps people motivated. It's an immediate result. Human nature is, I want it now. That's why weight loss pills do so well. That's why diets that promise the world do so well. I don't blame anybody. I fall for the exact same things. I try new things all the time, right? You're curious, you want the shortcut. And this is a way to see, hey, I did something, it worked or it didn't work. And why did it not work? Well, let's try it again. Let's experiment with it. So it can be super, super useful, at least to try for once in your life for a month, just to see what actually happens in my body, and not in one point in time, but consistently over a month, right? Because then you can really dive into, okay, is what I do most of the time, people say I'm 80% healthy and then 20% I do a cheat meal. Is that actually true? And most of the time, unfortunately, it's not. People overestimate how well they're doing, or they try to hide the fact that they binge eat every Friday, and then we can see that on the data. And now it's like, you really are not, you're going to be faced with the reality of what's going on, not in a good or bad way. It is what it is, right? But you can see it right away, action it, work with amazing doctors such as yourself to modify what you're doing to get the goals that you want and keep you motivated.
I'm curious how you've seen in your data, like athletes and people trying to truly optimize themselves rather
Yeah.
than just get out of a health crisis using this.
So athletes are some of the best users because they're diligent. And what they try to do is they're not really trying to understand if they're, what's going on. They're trying to get like a 1%, a 2%, a 5% improvement, because performance is everything. So, and they're like the type A personality that will log, like, I had 3 exact almonds and 4 raspberries, and I'm like, man, I used to log my food for years. I'm like, I never went that far. I love that consistency. But yeah, it's really become, for athletes, where we've seen anyway, such an amazing accountability tool. Are they actually doing the things that they're doing every single day? And then looking for, where can I get that 1% improvement, right? Do I eat that meal 30 minutes before workout, 45? After post-workout, do I do it right away? Do I wait a little bit? How does the recovery look? Do I increase my carbs? They can now start to see that data, because what happens with always on data is you look at your moving averages. Are they getting better? Are you getting better scores or not? Are you, even if it's by 1%, are they still getting better? And I think that's very motivating for them, because it goes back to, when you're that deep into your craft, you really want every single edge, and this is definitely just one of those.
Absolutely. And I have people ask me about like brain health and brain optimization all the time because I work with like a lot of high performers, and
Yeah.
I can run a food sensitivity test and I can get you off of foods that are really pissing your body off, but I can't always see exactly what it's doing with your blood sugar. And blood sugar is tied into every other system in our body, from our adrenals to our hormones to a whole bunch of different things. So when we can start to optimize this foundational piece of ourselves, we start to automatically optimize all of our other systems. And whenever I'm working with people, this is one of the first things I look at, is like, how do you manage your blood sugar? I usually do it with like questionnaires and symptoms,
Mm.
but this is going to be a whole new tool that I'm using, especially with like some of the CrossFitters I work with. I'm really excited to do it with them. I think it'll be a cool experiment
Oh,
because they're great, right? They're just this wonderful community that I get to watch, like, change what they're doing and get a new personal record, change what they're doing, get a new personal record. And so it's just a fun way to really see this being applied. So the other part of that I think you were mentioning is like, it connects you with your provider in a different way, so that you're not having to check up on your providers, as you said
yeah.
at the beginning, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
it motivates your provider to check up on you.
Right.
So what does that look like? Because I know that's kind of one of the special parts of your guys' tech.
Yeah. So when I was building it, I really wanted to not exclude the care team that you have as a person or an individual, or even a performance athlete, right? So we really built it with the provider first in mind, so that whoever you're working with, so anybody working with you, Dr. Christie, if they are on our platform, you also see that data. You can run reports with them, right? And now the conversation when you meet with your providers or your care team is less about what have you been doing, which was in the past a lot of the conversation.
Kind of a waste
Again,
of
you have to
time.
figure out, how did you sleep, how did you eat, have you been on the routine, did you fall off, what happened, right? Like, all of that data is now basically automated. And so with that, it opens up a better planning for the provider to look at, what am I going to talk to this person about, how am I going to modify the plan or the performance plan. And then on the flip side, the consumer can go in and know, hey, I know that like 5 things didn't do to me. What are your opinions? I was thinking of doing this. So it really builds a better affinity, because there's all this, you know, the gathering of data, which used to be tedious and super subjective and not accurate at all, has now been automated, right? And it just opens up a lot of good convo and less time spent on things you don't really have to talk about.
Well, and like, and this is relevant for so many people, either, you know, optimization or chronic conditions, because it's not just like diabetes, it's also like neuropathy and
Yeah.
other things that are highly tied to blood sugar and brain performance and neurodegeneration and all of these other things. So we can start figuring these things out and tracking them, then we can make a difference really quick with food alone. Because like, yeah, like I like supplements, I like helping people with that, but I'm always turning to food first. I'd much rather treat someone with lifestyle and help them actually find something that's sustainable for them, where they're not always being permanently restricted too. Because like I've been in that boat where you can eat like 3 things and it's just not fun. And it's hard when practitioners just tell you what to do and they don't really tell you how. So this is one of those other tools where you can actually start to learn how to do things yourself on your own, so you can become your own health authority, which is always like, that's why I do these things, is so that people can have the resources that they need to feel empowered in their health, rather than feeling like they always have to turn to something outside of them to be healthy. So I think that leads kind of nicely into my next question too, which is around like, where is healthcare going in this realm of like biohacking and tech, and kind of like, for like, because you know, we know each other through conferences that we go to where it's all these wonderful practitioners that are just 10 steps ahead, and I love it because it's everyone kind of realizing what parts of the system are broken and side routing it and figuring out like a new system. And I think this plays right into it, and starting to really understand tracking tech. So yeah, like being in the tech side of things and the development side of things, what do you see for the future of this kind of work?
Yeah, I love this. This is my favorite question, because now we get to nerd out. And, you know, I think we've talked a lot about continuous glucose monitoring, and which is, you know, blood sugar is directly related to metabolic health, which is the #1 crisis right now in the healthcare
I think
system.
it's
So
80% of people are metabolically unhealthy.
in the States, it's 92%. So,
There you go.
and it's a billion plus worldwide. So it's about like 25%, basically like 20% of everybody. And I think those numbers are also a little bit off.
And you don't have to be overweight to be metabolically unhealthy, by the
No,
way.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. People don't know that. They think if somebody's overweight, that's the only indicator. Nothing could be further from the truth,
You
actually.
can be skinny and get dementia.
Totally, absolutely. So with that kind of as a caveat, you know, our company wasn't meant to, hey, let's use CGM or continuous glucose monitors as technology. That was just the first tech that I figured out, hey, this is actually really useful. We should build software that makes this easy to understand for the consumer and the provider. But really, we talked to a lot of companies who are coming out with really cool technologies where we're going to be able to read, hey, your ketones or your hormones or your fat levels, right? And is omega-3 off of omega-6? And again, it's not so much one point in time that matters. Sometimes that's all that matters. Like you don't need it. Exactly. It's the moving average. So are we optimized in those metrics daily, weekly, 60% of the time, 70% of the time? And once we can get that, we can really then, the next phase of what we're looking to build is, can we predict a couple things? One, behavior. So if we have enough data on somebody and we know you eat pizza on Wednesdays, can we pattern interrupt people to say, I know you're going to eat pizza, go for it. This is the best one for you. Do you want us to pre-order it? And then if you say yes, then we can say, oh, by the way, like you earned X amount of points on your lifespan, or X amount of points in reducing disease. So that's where we definitely see it going. And then also even more cool, probably, well, for me anyway, because
I know I'm nerding out over here.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
Because if we can get enough data on somebody, then we can accurately predict 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, what are your odds of getting these diseases? And if you're making decisions and shrinking those odds, then we can, you know, then this becomes a really good conversation for lots of different companies out there that want to know this, because we feel like once we nail that, and insurance could come in, actually get all of everything we do charged for free to users, and now you're getting free health data on yourself, because they know now, hey, as long as we have this data and this person's doing good things for themselves. I know this is like, people are going to say, I don't want insurance knowing this or not. I'm just saying there's going to be companies that are going to be behind this kind of technology, because they can see it's going to reduce costs in hospitals. It's going to reduce the economic, which is 4.3 trillion. Economic burden is 4.3 trillion in the US alone, right? It's because of all these inefficiencies and are not paying attention until we have disease, and then prescribing more, and health insurance just keeps going up because you have so many billables, you have so many people that are constantly going to the hospital, right? So we're really looking to like cut that off, and if we can, then the sky's the limit in terms of optimizing healthcare and empowering people to do cool things.
Absolutely. And, I think of hospitals as like they're life-saving
Right.
facilities. They're not health care facilities. Like,
Best analogy.
yes. And so this is a form of healthcare. So it's like, this is how you can actually prevent yourself from having to go, or to know if you're developing something before it happens. And, I think I was nerding out with you at the conference, and I was like, the thing I would like to see is, so it's like, imagine if in the future we had these little devices that you could check your thyroid at any point in time, or you could check your hormones, like you were saying, or you could check, even antibodies to, say, foods, because I love food sensitivity tests, but they change over time, which is why we run different ones, so we can kind of work with your immune system as it's changing, because your body's always changing. It's dynamic, which is exactly why, like what you said about like a point in time on a blood test, isn't that helpful?
Right.
And honestly, like if I'm doing hormones, like I also have to look at a whole bunch of other things than just like one point in time. Or if it is one point in time, it has to be at exactly the right time or day of like a certain time period. And being able to track those things over time would just make a huge difference. So this is great. Like I love talking about the future and letting people know what's coming out that's cool and affordable and accessible and stuff that you can use in your own life at home. And so if you guys are interested, or like you want to read more about this, I put a little link for you in my bio. You can just click on the bio and go to the one that says recommendations, and it's like the first thing on the page. But yeah, just knowing these tools are out there, and then you can start blending this with things like a Fitbit or an Oura ring. And then you can start seeing like, oh, wow, I actually did not sleep as well when I spiked my blood sugar before bed. How interesting. Right. And like, we all know these things, but some of us just need that like slap in the face of a number to be like, okay, like actually this happened, and now it's real and in front of my face. And now I have the motivation to make a change, rather than just having like the theoretical information that I somehow couldn't get the motivation out of.
Yeah, and a couple points you made that I really liked. One was, slapping yourself and seeing it. I think I had this discussion with somebody, which was, if you feel like you did something that wasn't right for your body, I think that's better than if you don't feel it. Right? Because I was like, there's so many people that think they're like, they just feel fine, and then we look at their data and we're like, hey, you should really talk to your provider, because we're not going to make any diagnoses, but this is something that you should look into. And I think you just get to a point, because the body's good at adapting. Even when I was sick, there was days I remember I felt really bad, but I thought I felt fine until I got better, and I was like, man, no, I didn't. It's just because the body compensates so much. So until you can actually feel better, you sometimes don't have any clue that it's going on. And a lot of the time, there's like 92 million pre-diabetics in the States. I'm willing to bet right now, a lot of them have no idea, and they think they're fine. And you're like, well, 5 to 15 years from now, it's going to look a little bit less fine, right? When that elevates. And then the second thing was on the like having devices in the future. Since we were nerding out, I actually have now insights on tech where we're going to get to a point where there's like particle sized nanobots that can go in and look at cells and even possibly regenerate them. So we can get like all the way out there, because it's a lot of it is hidden from the public until it like hits, and then it's everywhere, you know. But there's really cool things coming down the pipeline, which I think most of it empowers the user, because the more you know about yourself, the more you can ask questions and be an advocate for you, versus like just take this plan or take this drug and follow my advice.
Absolutely. And you know, and I'm just kind of watching the chat here too, because I love making this relevant for everybody watching. So one of the comments was around, you know, like enabling all of our data to be tracked. Let's be real, it's all kind of tracked anyway. And this the thing I like about this is that it can stay personal to you, and it's private, right? It's private health information. So you don't have to attach it to anything. It can literally, you don't even have to work with a practitioner on it. You can literally just do it yourself with this company if you want to, which is why I partnered with them, is to make it accessible. Other things that I saw is people commenting on like all of the other reasons your health could be off: parasites, heavy metals, toxins, mold. Yes, like if you guys watch my channel, I talk about that stuff all the time.
Yeah.
However, this would be an indicator of like when your blood sugar is totally out of whack and you can't handle normal foods. It's a very direct indicator that there are other things to look for. So it's just one tool among many. You obviously still have to do holistic healthcare and address the entire system. Mm-hmm. And I'm always a fan of food first. And this is one of those things that allows you to use food as medicine before having to turn to vitamins or supplements or medications. So this would be kind of the first intervention that you could use for yourself, where literally you're just starting to figure out what parts of your lifestyle are broken for you. Mm-hmm. Because I think, just like you said, it's like people get stuck in their routines, and sometimes you need that like data in front of you to be like, oh, I am off, because you've been so stuck in autopilot that you don't even realize that you've had a stomach ache for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I had a patient the other day, and we've been working with her, and she's like working on her gut, and she's been doing great. She had some autoimmune stuff, and she messaged me the other day. She's like, hey, I think I'm in a flare. Like all my joints hurt. This is happening. My brain feels foggy. And I was like, you know what? My proudest moment right now is that you realized that you were in a flare, and then you reached out and you told me what you were already doing. You had already made changes to adapt, and then you asked me what else could be done. And so in that moment, for what's going on with her right now, we completely flipped what we're doing with our whole plan, because we have to get her out of the flare, and then we'll go back to what we were doing. But the fact that she could realize it and feel it and know that like her achy joints aren't supposed to be there, the only reason that she can do that is because we've had her optimize her lifestyle enough that she had a moment in time where she didn't feel poorly. And then she was like, oh, and she realized how she'd been feeling. And I think that's where a lot of people are at, just like you're saying, they're just stuck in this place of like not even knowing that they don't feel great. And if we can give you data so you can be like, oh, like this really throws my system off, let me not do that for a month. And then all of a sudden you finally feel better, and your brain works, and you're sleeping, and your skin clears up, and your hair gets thicker, and you're losing weight effortlessly. Then all of a sudden you're starting to figure out what you're supposed to feel like. And then when you do that binge, you start to feel really crummy, and you don't need data to tell you that, but you might need data in the beginning to get you out of your autopilot brainwash rut that you're stuck in.
Yeah, I think that's extremely well said. You know, and I'm like, I'll be the first to admit, I get into those too. So now it's like, I mean, I wear a CGM almost all the time, especially because I present them, right? And I show people, and it just makes me, because I see it all the time, I'm less likely to make, and this is actually a good tangent here. When people take it off, they tell me they have cheat meals that day. They're like, because I can't see it, I know you can't see it, you know, like my provider can't see it. They're like, it's cheat day. I'm like, well, I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be, but okay. You know, my co-founder all the time is like, oh, I took it off today. You know, I'm going to cheat today. And I'm like, okay. But I think over time, you start to, again, like you said, you're more and more conscious if it's in front of you. So it's not something you have to do all the time, but it's such a good reminder when you put it on, and it's such a good accountability to see your body's data.
And I love what someone just said. He said, health is the most basic, yes, most important thing. Sounds counterintuitive, but it's not. If you're not healthy, you can't even go to the beach. And I could not agree more. So it's like, this is just one of those things where you realize that health is literally the most important thing in your life. Like, and I don't know, this might itch people in some areas, but like even more important than family, because like if you're not healthy, you can't hang out with your family.
Yep.
So it's like you have to prioritize yourself and your health first, and then you can be there for your loved ones. So just thoughts for everybody. And I love conversations like this, and with people who are like making shifts and making changes in the world. And and I just saw someone said like, what's the best tracker for sugar? Well, I'd say that's this entire conversation. And so like the continuous glucose monitor is one of the best ways that you can track and understand sugar, not just in your life but in your body. So from there, I guess if you had anything that you just really wanted people to know, like as you're making these shifts in the world and you're trying to make changes in healthcare in a pretty big way,
Mm-hmm.
like what's just that one thing where you're like, I just want everybody to know this?
I think the number one thing, and this goes back to a lot of people, when I share my story, I get a lot of people message me saying, how did you battle through the Crohn's? How did you make it through? And I actually always say, I know you're going to want me to tell you like a specific diet plan or like talk to these 4 doctors or whatever. But it was really, you have to get to a spot, whatever way you can do this, right? So I'm not telling you it's easy or it's simple, but whatever way you can get to a point where you have full belief in that you're going to solve the problem for yourself. You'll move mountains, you'll climb Everest. Like it's like, how do you get to the point where you're that motivated to get it done? And you made a pretty good point, which was, when you're sick, the only thing you want is to feel better, right? Like everyone here has probably had a stomach virus or food poisoning. When you're in that state, you're like, I'll trade all my money, all my friends can go away if I just feel better. And I think that was the biggest difference between when I got better versus not, which was I was the most willing person to try new things, even if it didn't work out. And it was because I had belief. I was like, I want the life that I want. And I was very motivated to achieve the things I want to achieve, which actually drove me to get 7 doctors. Like, who does that, right? Like, why would you get 7 doctors? Why would you? Yeah, exactly. So it's like, but I had a reason to do it, is I think the thing is like, find reasons. I don't care if they're superficial. If you want a Lambo and that's going to make you like go all out on your health, great, go for it, right? It doesn't matter. Don't let other people judge you, but you really have to find, like, stack things in your favor that are going to make you want to do everything possible to get really healthy. And then life really just opens up, as Dr. Christine was saying. Like, that's the only place you can build from abundance or contribute, and have a great family. Like, you can't do it otherwise. If you're always drained of energy, don't have time for them, it's just impossible. But that's the one thing. I know people sometimes don't like that answer because they're like, well, yeah. I'm like, well, yeah, is it might be obvious, but are you actually that motivated? Like, your actions have to show that. And if they're not, then you have to be real with yourself and get leverage to do so, right? And again, it can be anything. It's just get it.
Well, and I like what you just pointed out too, where it's like health doesn't always mean a health crisis. Health can mean waking up tired every day, having a crash in the afternoon, kind of having a stomach ache, getting bloated when you eat, being grumpy, having anxiety, not really being excited about your life. That can actually all be tied to sugar. It took me like 10 years to figure out that I have a depression reaction to sugar 72 hours after I consume it. It took me
Wow.
a very, very long time to figure that out. And it affects my brain. It affects my neurotransmitters. And it's just, and these are the things where you can realize like when that happened, where you're like, why am I so off today? And then you like look at your dad and you're like, oh, because of the pizza and beer spike. Got it. So it's just, starting to understand your body in that way. And again, for anyone, I just have like another comment for anyone watching. The link is just in my bio, and you can just click on the recommendations tab, and it's the first thing on that page. And I just have like some of my favorite recommendations there. But if people wanted to learn more or to understand this more, like where would you direct them?
Yeah, I think honestly, you said it best, is if you click on Dr. Christine's link in her bio, it'll say, continuous glucose monitoring. It's going to take you to a page where it explains what that actually looks like. So what is a sensor? How do you put it on? How big is it? What are you going to be able to do with the app in terms of tracking your own food, logging, the easy to understand scoring, like all of that's really explained there. So that's 100% the best place to go. And it's going to show you everything you need to know to make an educated decision if you want to try it or not.
Awesome. And just so that people are clear, through their program, you can do this on your own. Or like say you're working with me or you're working with somebody else and you want to share that data, you can hook it up so that your practitioner can have access to the data. So it's basically just a way for you to have it be easily accessible, because I think tracking your own data and understanding your own body should be something that we all have access to, rather than feeling like it's a really restricted thing to understand yourself.
100%. I couldn't agree more with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It's always great talking with you.
Thank you. I had a blast. I always love talking and connecting with people in the industry, especially your audience is always awesome. And I'm sure we'll do it again at some point.
Absolutely. And if anyone has questions, I'll be posting this right after this on the feed, and just comment below the video and let us know like what you want to learn more about. We can always do another one. So we just do this for you. We just want you to know what's out there and know how to be healthy and how to have a better life that you savor instead of one that you just survive in. So
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
sounds good. Have a good day.
Bye.